Do you ever find yourself maybe scrolling through the news or just chatting with friends, and you get this feeling like the world is constantly spiraling downwards, or that it's just, fundamentally split into us versus them?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common feeling, I think. We all have these kinds of mental maps of the world.
Right.
And what's fascinating and maybe a bit concerning is how often those maps are, well, pretty outdated
Oh,
or maybe skewed by our own sort of limited experiences.
it really is a common cognitive trap.
It is. So today we're doing a deep dive into how our natural dramatic instincts, these subconscious pulls, can seriously mislead us about what's actually happening globally.
We're going to look at 10 of them, right? Things like seeing the world in black and white,
Yeah.
or always focusing on the bad news.
Exactly. And understanding them can help build a more, let's say, fact-based worldview. You might genuinely be surprised by what the data actually shows.
Yeah, I think so too. So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack the information you've provided, pull out the key insights, and, well, challenge some of those common misconceptions. Hopefully give you a clearer, more accurate picture of the world.
Cutting through the noise, essentially.
Precisely. Finding what's truly important in all that information overload.
Okay, so where should we start? A big one is probably the gap instinct.
Yes. That one feels very familiar.
It's that almost irresistible urge we have to divide everything into two distinct groups, usually conflicting ones. And we imagine this huge gap, this chasm of injustice in between.
Like the classic rich versus poor, or developed versus developing.
Exactly those.
It feels so intuitive, doesn't it? Like there must be this massive divide.
It does feel intuitive, but the sources we looked at point out that this view is, well, it's based on a really outdated picture, specifically from 1965.
1965.
Yeah, back then, if you actually plotted child survival against family size on a chart, you did see two very distinct clumps. It visually created that gap.
But you're saying that's just not the reality anymore.
Not at all. The world's had a, what the sources call a complete makeover since then. That gap, it's basically gone.
Gone. Right.
Pretty much. Today, the vast majority of people globally are actually living in the middle of the income scale. They're not in extreme poverty, and they're not hyper rich either. It's a fundamental shift that, honestly, most people haven't quite caught up with.
So if that old developed versus developing idea is obsolete, how should we think about it? Our sources suggested a different way, right?
Yeah.
4 income levels.
Yes, and it's a much more useful framework. Really helps reframe your perspective. Let's walk through them quickly.
Okay.
Level 1 is roughly living on about $1 a day.
$1.
Yeah. Imagine walking hours barefoot just to fetch dirty water in a single plastic bucket. Eating the same, gray porridge meal after meal.
Okay.
Maybe a child dies from a simple cough because of smoke from the indoor cooking fire, and there are no antibiotics. About 1 billion people still live like this.
1 billion. That's still a huge number. Okay, what about level 2? That's around $4 a day.
Right, $4 a day. And here you start seeing some basic but significant improvements. Maybe there's a cold water tap in the yard, so no more hours walking for water.
Okay.
Perhaps a basic stove, maybe even a bicycle for getting around. This is where the largest chunk of humanity is today, roughly 3 billion people.
3 billion. Wow. Okay, then level 3 is about $16 a day. What changes there?
Yeah, $16. This often means people are working multiple jobs, maybe 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to quadruple that income from level 2.
Hard work.
Definitely. But with that income, you might save up for a fridge. The kids can do homework better because there's stable electricity. Maybe you get a motorcycle, which means you can commute to a better factory job further away. About 2 billion people are on this level.
Okay, multiple jobs, saving, some key appliances, and finally, level 4. That's $32 or more per day.
Correct. And this is almost certainly where most of you listening are. You likely have a car, hot and cold, running water inside your home, probably more than 12 years of education.
And it strikes me, living here on level 4, it makes it incredibly hard to really grasp the differences between levels 1, 2, and 3, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like the sources use this analogy of looking down from a skyscraper. Everything below looks small.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell the difference between a small building and a slightly taller small building from way up high. They all just look low down.
That's a perfect analogy. So how do we fight this gap instinct? The sources mentioned comparing and dividing.
Exactly. Crucial tools. Avoid lonely numbers. A number on its own tells you very little.
Right.
Always look for comparisons, especially rates, like things per capita per person. That gives you the real picture, the context.
Understanding the proportion not just the raw number.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. But, even if things are improving, so many of us still feel like the world's getting worse. Why is that? What's that instinct?
Ah, yes. That feeling, that pervasive sense that things are getting worse, that's the negativity instinct. It's powerful. We're kind of hardwired to notice the bad stuff, the threats. And let's be clear, there are serious problems. Rising terrorism, overfishing, the state of the oceans, these are real concerns.
Definitely shouldn't ignore those.
Yeah.
But the data, it paints a different picture on some big trends.
It really does. Some truly surprising facts emerge when you look longer term. For instance, extreme poverty living on level 1 has almost halved in just the last 20 years.
Halved.
Yeah, down from about 34% of the world population to around 10.7%. That's incredible progress.
That figure, honestly, it's way more positive than I would have guessed, just based on the news cycle. Why don't we hear about that more?
Well, good news is rarely news, is it? Gradual improvement doesn't make headlines. Here's another one. Deaths from natural disasters. They've fallen dramatically. They're down to less than half of what they were 100 years ago. Now about 25%.
And that's not because there are fewer disasters.
Right. Exactly. It's because of better infrastructure, warnings, medical facilities were more resilient. And think about global life expectancy. Despite terrible dips, like the catastrophic famine in China in the 60s that killed millions,
Yeah, it's terrible.
the overall trend for life expectancy is remarkably consistently upwards.
That resilience point is key. And the sources mentioned something about graveyards, too, which I found really striking.
Oh, yeah, the child graves. It's poignant, isn't it? Today, thankfully, child graves are relatively rare in most cemeteries.
Uh-huh.
But if you look at ancient burial sites, archaeologists consistently find that a huge proportion of the remains are children, often showing signs of malnutrition, disease, violence. It tells a story of how dangerous childhood used to be.
A very different reality. And girls' education.
Another huge success story, relatively speaking, primary school attendance for girls globally is now almost the same as for boys. It's about 90% for girls versus 92% for boys. That's fantastic progress since, say, 1970.
Okay, so if all this progress is happening, why the doom and gloom? Why does it feel like things are getting worse?
A big part of it is the media landscape. We have vastly improved surveillance of suffering.
Surveillance of suffering. That's an interesting phrase.
It means we hear about bad news from everywhere, instantly, which can create an illusion that things are worse than ever, even if the overall trend is improving.
Right.
Plus, activists, journalists, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, they tend to highlight temporary dips or really extreme events. It creates drama, gets attention. Think about U.S. violent crime rates.
Okay.
They have actually been falling pretty steadily since the 1990s. But ask most people, they'll tell you crime is getting worse. The perception lags way behind the reality.
So controlling this negativity instinct, it's about perspective shift.
Precisely. You need to practice distinguishing between a level like, this situation is bad, which it might be, and a direction of change like, but it's getting better, which it also might be.
Things can be bad and getting better simultaneously.
Exactly. And remember, good news is slow news. Gradual improvements rarely make the headlines. They just happen.
That's a really useful distinction. Okay, let's talk trends. We see a line going up sharply on a graph, and our brain just assumes it's going to keep going up like that forever.
Ah, the straight line instinct. Yes. Very common. We intuitively assume trends will continue in a straight line, especially steep increases.
And this really fuels anxieties, doesn't it? Like world population just growing and growing exponentially, running out of resources.
It absolutely does. It's like seeing something flying towards you and instinctively predicting its path in a straight line. But complex systems rarely work that way.
So what's the reality with population?
Well, the UN forecasts something quite surprising to most people. The number of children in the world aged 0 to 15. It's expected to stay roughly the same by the year 2100 as it is today.
Stay the same, not increase.
Stay the same. Around 2 billion children. Most people, even experts in other fields, get this wrong when asked.
That is genuinely surprising. So we've reached, or are reaching, what's sometimes called peak child.
Essentially, yes, peak child. Because there's been this absolutely dramatic drop in the number of babies per woman globally.
How dramatic.
We've gone from an average of about 5 babies per woman back in 1948 down to just under 2.5 today. The sources call this maybe the most dramatic, world-changing demographic shift in human history.
Wow. What's driving that? You'd instinctively think, well, more children surviving childhood means the population must boom even faster.
It feels counterintuitive, but the change is directly linked to people escaping extreme poverty, moving up those income levels we talked about.
Ah, okay.
As families get healthier, better off, they no longer need large families for farm labor or as a tragic kind of insurance against high child mortality rates.
Right.
Plus, critically, education for women and access to modern contraception play a huge role.
So it leads to this almost paradoxical truth.
Exactly. The old idea that saving poor children just leads to overpopulation is completely wrong. It's the opposite. Lifting people out of extreme poverty, improving health, providing education and family planning, that is the most proven way to slow down and eventually stabilize population growth.
So controlling that straight line instinct means remembering curves aren't always straight lines.
Definitely not. In reality, graphs are often S-curves, or they form humps or slides. They rarely just shoot upwards forever like a rocket. Things tend to level off, find new balances.
That's a good reminder for many things, not just population. Okay, but what about things that do genuinely scare us? Our primal fears. They can really cloud our judgment about how dangerous the world actually is, can't they?
Oh, massively. That brings us to the fear instinct.
Right.
Those deep-seated fears, physical harm, being trapped, contamination, they can seriously distort our worldview, especially perhaps for those of us on level 4 where daily life is generally less physically threatening than it used to be or still is on lower levels.
And the media often plays on these fears, right?
Oh, absolutely. Fear sells. It grabs attention because it taps into something very primal. Effective because it resonates. But let's look at the data again. Natural disasters, we mentioned, deaths are way down, only 25% of what they were 100 years ago.
Right.
But we hear so much about them. The sources use the Nepal earthquake example. 9,000 people tragically died.
A terrible event.
But it points out that in the same 10 days globally, another 9,000 children died just from diarrhea, mostly from contaminated water on levels 1 and 2.
And where were the camera crews and helicopters for them?
Exactly. The media focus tells a story about what we deem newsworthy fear.
It really does.
Yeah.
Or think about flying, air travel.
Yeah.
In 2016, there were something like 40 million safe commercial passenger flights worldwide. 40 million. And only 10 fatal accidents.
10 out of 40 million.
Right. But which ones make the news? Not the 39,999,990 safe ones. Safe flights aren't dramatic. Normality isn't news.
What about war? Conflict. The news makes it seem like the world is more violent than ever. Again, the long-term data tells a different story. Global conflict fatalities are actually at a record low, historically speaking. We're living in the longest period of peace between major superpowers in human history.
Really?
Yes. Now, that doesn't minimize the horror of current conflicts. Like in Syria, those are horrific tragedies. But the overall trend in battle deaths per capita has been falling, decade by decade. It's important context.
Okay. And terrorism. That feels like a constant growing threat.
Terrorism is worsening in some aspects. Globally, that's true. But we need perspective. In 2016, it accounted for only 0.05% of all deaths worldwide. A tiny fraction.
0.05%.
And in level 4 countries, the risk is even lower and has actually been decreasing overall in recent decades despite spikes. In the US, for example, the sources state your risk of being killed by someone driving drunk is nearly 50 times higher than being killed by a terrorist.
50 times. Wow. That puts the fear into perspective.
It does. The fear instinct dramatically inflates our perception of certain risks over others.
There's also this idea of chemophobia mentioned, the sort of irrational fear of chemicals. I have to admit, I've probably done that, looked at an ingredient list and thought, ooh, chemicals.
It's an easy trap. Because, of course, everything is made of chemicals. Water is a chemical.
Right.
This fear often comes from generalizing from a few genuinely harmful substances. But take DDT, for example. Hugely controversial.
Yeah.
But after massive investigation, the WHO eventually classified it back in 2006 as only mildly harmful and acknowledged its benefits outweighed its risks in specific situations, like malaria control. The fear was disproportionate to the overall evidence.
So controlling the fear instinct, the key is calculating actual risk.
Yes. Risk equals the actual danger multiplied by your exposure to it, not just how scary it feels. And crucially, try to get calm before making decisions when fear kicks in. Our emotional gut reaction isn't always the most reliable guide.
Danger times exposure. Okay, calm down first. Makes sense. So we're not letting fear dictate things. But what about just sheer numbers? big, scary numbers that grab headlines.
Yeah.
That leads us to the size instinct, right?
Exactly. Our tendency to misjudge the importance of a single large number, a lonely number, or focus heavily on one identifiable victim while ignoring vast, abstract statistics.
And this messes up our priorities, doesn't it? Leads to inefficient resource allocation, maybe underestimating progress because we fixate on one negative data point.
It absolutely does. And the solution, again, is pretty straightforward. Compare and divide.
Compare and divide.
Never just accept a number on its own. Always ask, compared to what? Remember the author visiting Vietnam?
That's a war memorial.
Seeing the relatively small monument for what they call the resistance war against America compared to other larger monuments in the city, it gave him a totally different sense of historical scale and perspective than his Western viewpoint had anticipated. The comparison was key.
That's a great example. And the comparison between media coverage of swine flu and tuberculosis was just staggering.
It really was. Swine flu, 31 deaths in a period, over 250,000 articles. That's what, over 8,000 articles per death?
Crazy number.
In the same period, TB killed over 63,000 people, mostly on levels 1 and 2. It got maybe 700 articles. That's 0.1 articles per death.
So each swine flu death got something like 82,000 times more media attention than each equally tragic TB death.
That's the size instinct and the fear instinct working together, amplified by media focus. It completely skews our perception of relative risk and importance.
And the dividing part, using rates.
Crucial. Arguing about total CO2 emissions per country is kind of pointless without dividing by population. Per capita emissions tell a different story.
Right. Canada's per capita emissions are double China's, 8 times India's, based on the source data.
Exactly. And the richest billion people on the planet burn over half of all fossil fuels each year. The poorest billion, responsible for only 1%. Dividing by population or income level changes the narrative completely.
There's also that out there versus here idea, isn't there? That the rest of the world, being millions of places, will naturally have more bad events happen than your one single place here.
Yeah, and that can make the world seem much more dangerous than your personal experience suggests, just because out there is so much bigger than here.
So to control the size instinct, look at proportions, compare numbers, divide them by relevant factors like population or income. Don't be swayed by lonely giants.
Well put. Always ask, compared to what, divided by what?
Okay. Now, when we try to make sense of all this complexity, our brains naturally want to categorize, group things together. But that leads to another trap, the generalization instinct.
It does. We automatically categorize and generalize. It's essential for making sense of anything. But it also means we can mistakenly lump vastly different things, people or countries, together.
And jump to conclusions based on maybe just one or two vivid but unrepresentative examples.
Precisely. Here's a great example from the sources. Ask people what percentage of the world's 1-year-old children are vaccinated against some disease.
Okay. What do people usually guess? Low.
Very often, yes. Even highly educated people, finance managers in the example, guess around 20%, 50% maybe. The reality,
What is it?
88%.
88%. Wow.
Wow.
Okay, I have to admit, that's much higher than I would have guessed too. That's incredible progress we just don't register.
Incredible progress. And this instinct also makes us miss something fundamental. The source material argues that the characteristics of daily life are often more similar across income levels than they are across countries or cultures.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about a level 2 family in rural China, how they cook, store food, the roof on their house. It's remarkably similar to how a level 2 family lives in, say, Nigeria or Bolivia. Their daily reality, their struggles, their aspirations within that level have more in common with each other than the level 2 family in China has with a level 4 family living in Shanghai. Income level trumps national borders for many aspects of life.
That's a really important point. And this instinct fuels really bad generalizations about whole continents too, doesn't it? Like Africa.
Oh, definitely. Talking about Africa's problems as if Africa were one country. It's a continent of 54 incredibly diverse nations.
Right.
Vastly different levels of development, different cultures, different environments. Remember the Ebola example?
Yeah, it was in West Africa.
But tourism collapsed in Kenya, which is like a 100-hour drive away on the other side of the continent. People generalized the fear across thousands of miles and completely different realities.
So controlling generalization means questioning our categories. Looking for differences within the groups we create.
And similarities across different groups, and being really suspicious when one vivid story or example is used to make a point about an entire group. Assume it might be the exception, not the rule.
Look within groups, look across groups, beware of vivid examples.
Got it.
But even with all this data showing change and diversity, there's still this feeling, isn't there? That some societies, some cultures are just stuck, destined to be the way they are.
Ah, yes. The destiny instinct. That innate feeling, that innate characteristics determine the destiny of people, countries, cultures. That things are fixed, unchanging.
Like they've always been poor, they'll always be poor. Or that culture just doesn't value X.
Exactly, those kinds of thoughts. But the world is profoundly dynamic. Things are constantly changing, even if sometimes it's slow change.
We saw that with women's education already.
Absolutely. A massive shift in just a couple of generations. Globally, 30-year-old women today have spent, on average, 9 years in school. Nearly the same as men's 10 years. That's not destiny. That's rapid, fundamental transformation.
And the perception of Africa being destined to remain poor, that's just outdated thinking.
Completely outdated. Many African nations are among the fastest improving economies in the world. Countries moving from level 1 to level 2, like Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya. Average life expectancy across Africa is now around 65 years. These are not static societies defined by some unchanging destiny. They are societies in motion.
It's also often assumed religion dictates things like family size, isn't it? That some faiths are just destined to have large families.
A very common misconception fueled by the destiny instinct. But the data shows the stronger link is actually income and education, not religion itself.
Really?
Yeah. Look at Iran, a strongly Muslim country. It experienced the fastest drop in babies per woman ever recorded in history. Why? Excellent government-led family planning and sex education programs in the 80s and 90s.
Wow, okay.
Globally, if you compare Muslim women and Christian women controlling for income and education, the average number of children is very similar. Muslim women average 3.1, Christian women 2.7. Not some huge destiny-driven difference. Income and access to resources matter more.
That really challenges the stereotype. And even something like environmental protection, which can feel painfully slow.
Even there you see change, not destiny. The amount of land surface protected in nature reserves globally has gone from basically nothing, 0.03% in 1900, up to a really significant 15% today.
15%, that's huge, actually.
It is. It's slow, incremental change, but it's definitely not static. So controlling the destiny instinct means remembering. Slow change is not the same as no change. Keep updating your knowledge. Societies are like rivers, not rocks.
Societies are like rivers, not rocks. I like that. Okay, so we understand things change, they're complex, but what happens when we try to fix complex problems, or just understand them, and we get seduced by one simple idea, one single explanation?
That's the single perspective instinct, the lure of the simple idea, the belief that one single perspective, one single cause, or one single solution holds the key to understanding or fixing everything.
Like having a hammer and seeing every problem as a nail.
Exactly like that. And the problem is it makes us blind to other information, other perspectives. It prevents a real nuanced understanding. It's interesting, even highly educated experts can fall into this trap.
How so?
Well, they often score poorly on general knowledge questions outside their specific field of expertise. Their deep knowledge in one area can sometimes reinforce the single perspective instinct when looking at broader issues.
So being an expert isn't always enough. We need multiple viewpoints.
Absolutely. And numbers, while vital, aren't the only valuable perspective. The sources mention the Prime Minister of Mozambique.
Oh yeah, the shoes?
Right. He gauges economic progress not just from GDP statistics, but by looking at the quality of shoes people wear in parades. It's a different kind of data, a different perspective on reality.
And the example from medicine. The TB campaign in India.
Yes, Halfdan Mahler's passionate campaign. It wasn't as successful as hoped, not because the medical approach was wrong, but because it was a single focus. People had other, more pressing health issues, malnutrition, other diseases that weren't being addressed.
So sometimes the best medical intervention isn't medicine.
Sometimes. Sometimes providing reliable transport so pregnant women can actually reach the clinic has more impact than building more clinics. Or ensuring kids have electricity to study after dark might improve health outcomes down the line more than just a vaccination drive. It's about seeing the whole system.
And this applies to ideology too, right? The Cuba versus US example.
A fascinating contrast in the source material. Cuba is called the healthiest of the poor, great health outcomes relative to income, largely due to a strong, single-minded focus on centrally planned public health.
Okay.
The U.S., conversely, is described as the sickest of the rich, poorer health outcomes than expected for its wealth, arguably linked to a single-minded faith in free markets sometimes overriding public health needs. Both systems, driven by a dominant single idea, have strengths but also significant, distinct problems.
So even something we value highly, like democracy.
Even democracy, while hugely valuable, isn't necessarily the single prerequisite for all other kinds of progress. Many countries have made huge strides in health and economics without being liberal democracies first. Progress comes in many forms, through many pathways.
So controlling this single perspective instinct means testing our favorite ideas, looking for their weaknesses.
Yes. Being humble about what we know, being genuinely curious about different perspectives, even ones we disagree with, welcoming complexity, tackling problems case by case, not with a one-size-fits-all ideology.
Test ideas, be humble, be curious, embrace complexity. Okay. But when things go wrong in these complex systems, it's just so tempting to find someone to point the finger at.
Oh, absolutely. That's the blame instinct kicking in, that powerful tendency to find a simple reason why something bad happened. And that reason is usually a person or a group with bad intentions, a villain, or sometimes a hero if something went well.
Looking for the easy scapegoat or the simple hero narrative. It simplifies things, but it blocks understanding.
Completely. Remember the story about the malaria tablet contract?
With the Swiss company, Rival Farm?
Yeah. UNICEF gets this incredibly low bid. The immediate reaction is, this must be a scam. They're cutting corners, selling fake drugs. Blame the company.
Right.
But when they investigate, turns out the company was just incredibly efficient, had automated processes, and was banking on a huge volume. No villain, just an efficient system misunderstood because of the blame instinct.
It's also important to sometimes look inwards for blame.
The sources suggest that yes, instead of just blaming smugglers for refugee drownings, for instance, we might need to look at how our own restrictive immigration policies contribute to creating the dangerous situations that smugglers exploit. It's uncomfortable, but necessary.
And climate change is another big one where blame gets thrown around.
Hugely complex, but the data shows Level 4 countries, the richest billion, are responsible for the vast majority of historical CO2 emissions. The poorest billion contribute maybe 1%. So blaming developing nations today for wanting basic things like washing machines or reliable electricity, when they've contributed so little to the problem historically, it misses the systemic picture. It's not about finding a single villain nation.
Even powerful leaders. They don't just have a magic button, do they?
Not at all. The Pope, for example, condemns contraception. But contraceptive use in largely Catholic countries is around 60%, almost identical to the 58% in non-Catholic countries. People's behavior is shaped by many things beyond a single leader's pronouncements. Leaders rarely have a remote control.
So controlling the blame instinct means resisting the urge to find scapegoats or simple heroes.
Yes, look for causes, not villains. Understand the complex system that allows something bad to happen or something good. When good things happen, look for the system improvements, not just the individual leader who might get the credit.
Look for systems, not villains or heroes. Got it. Okay, last one. That feeling of we have to act now or never.
The urgency instinct, yes. It makes us want to take immediate, drastic action. It can shut down our critical thinking, create immense stress, or even lead to apathy if the problem feels too big and too urgent to solve.
It's that panic button.
Exactly. The author shared that story from Nakala.
With the mystery disease.
Right. Everyone feared some terrible contagious epidemic. The mayor immediately wanted roadblocks, quarantine, panic mode. But it turned out to be Konzo, a paralysis caused by cyanide poisoning from improperly processed cassava, which happens during droughts when people are desperate. Easily preventable with clean water for processing. Panic would have been the wrong response. Calm analysis found the real, simpler cause.
So salespeople, activists, they often deliberately trigger this limited time offer. Act now before it's too late.
They do, because it works. It bypasses rational thought. But the sources remind us. It's very rarely truly now or never. There's almost always time to think, even if it's just a little, and it's rarely a simple either or choice.
The Ebola example was quite telling on this too.
A really stark example. The CDC, partly to maintain funding and global attention, kept highlighting the rising number of suspected cases, kept the urgency high.
Okay.
But the real-time data on confirmed cases, which was harder to get but more accurate, was actually showing a decline. Why? Because the Liberian people themselves had changed their behavior, stopped risky burial practices, avoided unnecessary contact.
So the urgency narrative actually obscured the real progress being made on the ground.
And potentially misdirected resources by keeping the panic level artificially high. It shows the danger of letting urgency override careful data analysis. Clear data is essential for clear decisions, not just urgent ones.
So while huge global risks are absolutely real pandemics, financial collapse, war, climate change, we need to address them calmly.
Yes, acknowledging the risk doesn't mean succumbing to panic. Effective solutions require calm, data-driven analysis, collaboration, and often incremental steps, not rushed, fear-based black and white decisions.
Okay, so control the urgency instinct. Take a breath.
Yeah.
Insist on the data. Analyze it. Be wary of drastic predictions or actions. Remember, it's rarely truly now or never.
Take small steps. A step-by-step approach is usually better than giant leaps fueled by panic.
Right. So, wow, we've covered a lot. As we wrap up this deep dive, we've gone through these 10 dramatic instincts: the gap, negativity, straight line, fear, size, generalization, destiny, single perspective, blame, and urgency.
It's quite a list. And hopefully understanding them helps all of us start to see the world a bit more clearly as it actually is.
Which is still facing massive challenges, no doubt about it, but also making huge, often unreported progress.
Exactly. And this fact-based worldview, it's not about being blindly optimistic or needlessly pessimistic. The source calls it being possibilistic.
Possibilistic, I like.
Yeah, seeing what's actually possible based on the facts, appreciating the genuine progress that's been made, often against huge odds, and knowing clearly which challenges still need our focus, our energy, our resources.
It's about empowering ourselves with a more accurate map of the world. Okay, so final thought for you to consider. In this absolute flood of information we live in, where can you actively look for those stories of gradual, positive change? The ones that don't make the headlines.
How can you deliberately seek out the data, the context that paints that more complete, more nuanced picture? And maybe how can you share that perspective with others to help them see past the drama too?